In South Africa in particular, I think the type of quality education that we're speaking about is one that is free and one that is decolonized for sure, right? It's not just big fancy buildings with teachers who speak fancy rhetoric that is somewhat flowery. Big part of it is to think about is what we're teaching enabling us to build the type of society that we want? And if you can't answer that for me, then there's nothing revolutionary about your education model. It's somewhat repetitive. It's somewhat feeding into the status quo. That I'm like, if you are sitting back, you're like, we're going to teach this because we are ultimately trying to do this. Example, if you're thinking of how to build a great society and the type of the type of education that someone receives, it's somewhat in line of what does it look like to coexist with like difference, to like have a social contract of communal living, stuff like that. I'm like, for me, that's what really education should be about. That how do you envision the type of world that you want from a classroom into the world? What is really interesting maybe about challenges as a whole is that you face one and you end up overcoming it, and next time that you're facing another one, you go back to that time when you overcame the like previous one, and before you know it, you're like building this like confidence in yourself that I can actually solve problems for myself, and this moment too will pass, right? So I always like to just be looking forward. I don't like to be grounded, or maybe I don't like feeling static or like feeling like I'm held down by something or like someone.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Podcast. You're here because you believe that you too have been called to build and live an impactful life. However, you understand that having potential that cannot be put into fruition is similar to living a life that is purposeless. Having said this, our goal and mission of the show is to introduce you to young people across the globe who we believe are the next generation of thought leaders in their respective fields. Additionally, we aim to share with you ideas and concepts that you can implement to elevate both your business and personal life. Right, this episode's guest is known as the founder of EdConnect, an organization designed to use educational research to inform both policy and educational programs across Southern Africa. At the age of 22, this young individual has been featured across various international platforms, including Forbes, the Huffington Post, and the well-known BBC. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the young man who spent much of his time trying to figure out how to revolutionize the educational sphere in Southern Africa. Obakeng, Leseyane. Obakeng, thank you so much for joining us here at the Leaders Podcast. It's quite an honor to be sitting someone of such a caliber.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
I think to really start us off, Obakeng, I think tell us much more, and I know having been close with you back home in high school, tell us much more about how you became the Obakeng you are. You know, over the past week while looking at some of your TED Talk, you speak about how you were enslaved by poverty and how education was your liberation. I think tell us much more about that.
Yeah, so I think this is probably the story of many kids across the world, is that you look at where you come from, you look at what your parents can do for you, and often if it's very little, you think that attaining somewhat higher, high level of education will change this sort of situation back home. And my story is somewhat similar to that. I was born to a teenage single mother, and what was really interesting about the time that I was born is that my grandfather had just passed away, and my grandmother was also pregnant with my mom's little brother. And there were very limited financial means to be able to provide for both my uncle and I. And I remember, I think I was probably like in grade 3 at that point in time. I said, someday, I don't know when, I'll be able to go to the type of school that will really change the outlook of my life and where like I'd come from. And by luck and chance, 5 years later, I got a scholarship to go to a school down in Cape Town, which ultimately led me to meeting you a couple of years after that. But yeah, that is the story of, I think, a lot of South Africans, a lot of children across the world, is that there is a hope that you find in learning. So in somewhat, learning for a lot of people is a revolutionary duty to be able to change their families' family situations.
You seem to, and what I love about you is that you seem to have had to overcome a lot of challenges to be where you are. I think I'm quite much more interested also about what were you telling yourself. So you spoke about how you lost your how you lost your grandma and the situation at home. Grandfather, and how the situation at home could not allow you to do what you want to do. But when you were facing these challenges, I'm just trying to get into your mind. What were some of the things that you told yourself that kept you going? What motivated you?
But then, like what's crazy is sometimes you can't achieve your way out of certain things. It's like you can be celebrated, you can be whatever. When you're there, you're there. Like you feel like it's literally like a wrecking ball. And it's not things that you would even post about or like say to someone, hey, it's the pits back at home, or like I'm just not in a good mind frame, right? You like just show up until hoping that up until. So I like to think of I like the term impermanence. I believe that most things are impermanent, and even challenges for me are the same way. Often I mean, if I'm facing something that's quite hard, I would take some time off to just actually acknowledge the fact that this thing is hard, this is how it makes me feel, and then somewhat map out what could be done about it. And that is the much more healthier part of me kind of speaking. And typically I'm the type of person where if I'm facing with, if I'm dealing with like a problem, I just run to the solution. And I never think about how like I'm feeling about it, or like even acknowledge that it's like actually happening. I just want to get rid of it. But what is really interesting maybe about challenges as a whole is that you face one and you end up overcoming it. And next time that you're facing another one, you go back to that time when you overcame the like previous one, and before you know it, you're like building this like confidence in yourself that I can actually solve problems for myself, and this moment too will pass, right? So I always like to just be looking forward. I don't like to be grounded, or maybe I don't like feeling static or like feeling like I'm held down by something or like someone.
What I love about your answer is you spoke about often how you would go on and achieve some things and then figure out that this thing is actually something that you had been planning all along. So what I got from that is that you kind of give yourself a different reference point. Right.
Yeah.
So you had reached a certain level, and then it was now what's the next step, which I love about your answer. Well, listening to you also speak a lot about education.
Yeah.
And I think, talk to me, and I think also having looked through some of your work, you speak a lot about the importance for young Black South Africans post 1994, the importance of them having access to quality education. Talk to me about what education means to you.
Yeah.
And I think secondly, why you think it's important for young people to have access to quality education.
Yeah, so what you will find, and like sometimes when I think back at my life, I'm like, a big part of what I take interest in, a big part of the work that I still want to do in the world, is based on my childhood. Growing up, my grandmother has never attained high quality education. My mother dropped out of school because she obviously had to conceive me, and the point of going back has never been in the picture. So in some ways, I feel that some of my interests are not just mine alone, but it's for my grandmother, it's for my mother, but then also it's for me to think about what type of example do I set for my siblings and pretty much anyone else who could be watching. And in South Africa in particular, I think the type of quality education that we're speaking about is one that is free and one that is decolonized for sure, right? It's not just big fancy buildings with teachers who speak fancy rhetoric that is somewhat flowery. Big part of it is to think about, is what we're teaching enabling us to build the type of society that we want? And if you can't answer that for me, then there's nothing revolutionary about your education model. It's somewhat repetitive. It's somewhat feeding into the status quo that I'm like, if you are sitting back, you're like, we're going to teach this because we are ultimately trying to do this. Example, if you're thinking of how to build a great society and the type of the type of education that someone receives, it's somewhat in line of what does it look like to sort of coexist with like difference, to like have a social contract of communal living, stuff like that. I'm like, for me, that's what really education should be about. That how do you envision the type of world that you want from a classroom into the world?
Wow, what a deep answer. I think you speak a lot about the role of education in terms of building a relevant society, right? I think given South Africa where it is in this avant-garde era, what would you say are some of the things that young people should be taught, should be learning at this time that will cater to building such a society?
For sure. So what we know is that institutions and classroom are not the only answer in terms of educating people. You think about every single year, you have 1 million plus people finish matric, but even all of our institutions don't have the capacity to be able to absorb them, right? So you sit back, you're like, a big part of what we should be teaching is skills. Is that how do you enable someone to be able to do something on their own? Either it be program, either it be artisan work, field work, plumbing, stuff like that, right? And you will see that if you begin to look at education, not just in the typical sense of you go to class, you get grades, and you begin to expand it to say, if you are somewhat interested from an early age into mechanics, you could possibly explore that. You don't have to wait up until you complete matric, which then becomes a very irrelevant document, because how many people have like matric certificates but yet still can't find employment? Whereas if you focus from a skills perspective to say, if you've empowered someone with a skill, chances are, A, they are not only going to seek employment, but B, they could be the one actually providing employment, right? So somewhat when you are also trying to think about how do you tackle this unemployment problem, but that is literally so hard among young black youth, particularly women, you have to be skills-based. And that skills empowering has to start beyond the point at which that person could possibly look for a job.
I think in summarization, your answer touches on the importance of building independent people, right? Equipping them with skills that will allow them to do stuff that's not only relevant, but allow them to be independent as human beings in society, which I love a lot. Just to really change the trajectory of the interview, you also have so much interested in so much about running. I know you do a lot of running. Besides education, besides all the work that you've done in the education spectrum, I'm also quite interested in why you actually do running. Why do you think it's important? Why? What?
So to just really to just really make it simple, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe in God. I believe that everything that has happened in my life, everything that has led me to this point, it's by the work of God. And I think I used to like to say this to you quite a lot, that I am pressed to the mark for the higher calling of God. And every single running challenge, running, it's like somewhat like a metaphor for my life, I think. It's
marathon.
Yeah, it's so hard, but after you're like literally crossing that finish line, no other moment beats that, right? You can't fake it. You can't buy it. Do you know what I mean? You like literally feel it after your body has really been so drained and you have been telling yourself, I'm just going to keep going, and everything is telling you to stop. It's like, why are you chasing the wind? I mean, people like to say that, like, hey, Obakeng, why are you chasing the wind? But running for me has anchored me quite a lot, but also it's the time that I spend with God. It's literally priceless, man.
Wow, what a way to use running. I think what I love about you is also how you use running from your answer to build mental resilience, right? That ability to just go at it again and again and again. And as you said, the small steps, just keep one foot next in front of the other and just go as long as you're still alive. On that note, what would you say is your message to the world?
I would say that two things. You must never be well adjusted to injustice, and you must never be well adapted to indifference.
Thank you so much for that answer. Beautifully well articulated. I hope everyone took note. On the note, how can our viewers stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm quite active across all social media platforms. You could find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You could find me, I have a website, you could find me there, you could give me a call.
Okay. Your Instagram handle? What is it?
Leseyane.Obakeng. So it's like quite constant across all the other platforms. Yeah.
Okay. Right, guys. There you have it from Obakeng Leseyane himself. Guys, go check out what he's about on his social media platforms. Most importantly, go check out EdConnect. Quite some interesting stuff that what he has done at the age of 22. Once again, here at the Leaders Podcast, we believe that as more and more young people go conscious of their unique purpose, as they discover their hidden pearl, they add value to society in the only way they can. Once again, follow us at the Leaders Podcast on both our YouTube and our Instagram page. Until next time, see you.